Hello friends. In today's video, there will be mentions of suicide, self-harm, depression, eating disorders, and both physical and mental abuse of employees and children. So if you're sensitive to that, this video really isn't for you. We all good? Alright, without further ado, let's talk about the show, The Powers That Be. A comedy sitcom from 1992, starring John Forsythe, Holland Taylor, and even young Joseph Gordon-Levitt. In the show, we get a good look at the life of Senator Powers. We are introduced to him through one of his nightmares, which is no longer being a senator. Luckily, he is comforted by the woman sleeping next to him.
You are as moral as any man in this town.
Am I?
More so.
Oh, hell.
What?
I've got to call my wife.
Man, this show's more realistic than I thought. We get introduced to the senator's wife, and we immediately see what kind of person she is.
I was just in the powder room, and do you know what I found?
No, ma'am.
I found this lint ball on one of the guest towels.
Next, we get introduced to their daughter and her husband and son, who are by far the most realistic people on this show. The son is very clearly tired of being used as a photo opportunity,
I am not a photo opportunity.
and desperately reaches out to his father for any sort of support.
Dad?
I'll try. I'll fail.
Unfortunately, his father is just a shell of a man at this point, and I genuinely feel bad for them.
I'm gonna be in therapy for the rest of my life.
When Pierce, the son played by Joseph Gordon-Levitt, refuses to wear some footsie pajamas for the press, her response is just so sad.
Forget it, I won't do it.
Really? Well, your father and I were planning on having dinner with you one night this week. I guess we can just forget about that.
I see an overarching theme of invalidating people's emotions in this household for the sake of looking good for the press.
Your bandages are showing again. Try not to hunch and smile. You may be chronically depressive and occasionally suicidal, but you are also a member of the House of Representatives. At least try and look the part.
After the short introduction of the family, we get a look at the office, where we see two people, one of which is the senator's mistress, hard at work.
For that, you'd want Senator Elkin or Senator Shaw.
Shaw was indicted this afternoon for having sex with a minor.
But Elkin's your best bet.
Once again, being a little too realistic. A woman arrives unannounced with some important pictures for the senator, but is dismissed by the mistress. Back in the house, we learn about the daughter, Caitlin's eating disorder, which everyone kind of seems aware of, but are in denial of it being a real problem.
I thought this little eating disorder of yours was behind us.
The only people calling her out on it are her husband and her son.
You okay?
I'm fine. I'm just a little lightheaded from all the excitement.
I haven't eaten anything all week.
Excuse me?
Mother, you do this for every big party. You buy an outfit one size too small and then you starve yourself to get into it.
Mummy has no choice, darling. Look at me, I'm enormous.
And I'm happy.
The senator arrives home and we see him with his wife Margaret, and they're entertaining the idea of running for presidency while preparing for the press to arrive. The doorbell rings, but instead of the press, it's the same woman from earlier, revealing that she's the senator's illegitimate child, Sophie Lipkin. At first, he denies having an affair, but Sophie has an overwhelming amount of proof. The family is understandably shocked.
One moment, please. Bill and I were engaged at that time. That would mean he was having an affair. Bill Bill would never do that.
Of course not. That's ridiculous.
The senator takes Sophie aside while the press arrives. He tries to blow her off, but she's not having it. Finally settling for $12,000, a dish, a half-assed apology before breaking down. The senator leaves Sophie alone while she cries, being forced to attend the party. His wife confronts him about the affair.
Bill, how could you have done this to me?
Good, I was young, it was a war.
I'm not talking about the affair. I don't care about that. But that it was with a Jewess. That I will never... Matt Weinstein, how wonderful to have you in.
Of course she's anti-Semitic too. Finally, the guest of honor arrives. A legendary ex-football player who was left paralyzed after a tragic accident. They hoped he'd be the key to their re-election campaign, but the ex-athlete was inspired by the invitation to run against the senator. Their plan completely backfiring, and most of them panicking.
What? That's not fair. My whole life
Before going back into the chaos, Pierce pleads with his father one last time.
Dad. Let's get out of here.
Go upstairs.
No, I mean let's get out of here. Let's just go before she comes to.
No, she's your mother, and she's my wife. Where?
I don't care anywhere. Come on, Dad, they won't miss us.
No, she's still your mother, and she's still my wife, and we have a responsibility. I'm sorry.
But alas, they have to return to the situation at hand. The senator would rather announce his retirement than losing, but luckily Sophie brings them down to earth.
What's the big deal? So you lose, so what?
So what?
Well, at least you tried and people heard your voice. I realize that if by some miracle I am elected, I might actually be able to make a difference. But even if I lose, at least I've had the chance to let my voice be heard. Now, I'm sorry, but the guy who wrote that letter was not afraid of losing.
We finish the episode with the senator announcing his re-election. This show isn't something that would be on TV today. I think a lot of the things that were mentioned in this episode weren't something that could be talked about seriously in that day and age. I think it's important to mention how toxic some of the politicians and some rich households can be. And I think this show was the only way they could really show it on TV. Like I said, this show isn't for everyone, and I'm by no means an expert, so don't quote me on any of this. But I think they raise a valid point. I mean, sure, there are a lot of things that aren't really politically correct, as we would say today. But there are a lot of things that are really happening that are shown in this episode. This is just the first one. I think the show was really daring for being a show in the 90s. I mean, sure, it's a comedy, so a lot of things are laughed off, but they take on some serious topics like eating disorders, depression, even the toxicity in politics, and some rich households. Like I said, there are a lot of things that are going on behind the scenes, and a lot of people are hurt by it. And I think this show was the only way they could bring it out in the open, even if a lot of people laughed it off. If you want to watch this show, as always, the link is in the description. There are some commercials during the episode, so be aware of those. This is the only version I could find. Like I said 2 weeks ago, this show was so forgotten, I had a really hard time finding it. I hope you have a wonderful day, and as always, remember, you are loved, you are worthy, and you matter.